our series on innovative approaches to engaging families. This is the second in our webinar series, and I'm especially excited about this one because it is um, in partnership with our wonderful partners at Kofi. And it's also a really important time in Illinois for this kind of conversation to be happening with the creation of the new Illinois Department of Early Childhood. And as we work towards a system that truly centers family voice in early childhood. So I'm very excited to kick this off. I also realized I forgot to introduce myself at the top. So very quickly, my name is Angela Farwig, and I am the Vice President of Public Policy, Advocacy, and Research here at Illinois Action for Children. Very excited to be with you here today, and I'm going to kick it over to Bree Stormer to get us started. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Angela, and thank you all for being here with us on a Friday and for your commitment to family voice and family leadership in the policymaking process in early childhood. Before we go any further, I want to hand it off to Leo to make a quick announcement about Spanish translation.
Thank you so much, Bray. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to be making a quick announcement in Spanish. Hola, buenos días. ¿Cómo están? Si quieren escuchar la reunión en español y están en una computadora, entonces denle clic al globo en la parte inferior de su pantalla y allí escojan español o Spanish. Si están en un teléfono, en un iPad o tableta, toquen su pantalla. Van a ver 3 puntos con la palabra más o la palabra more, M-O-R-E. Denle clic, seleccionen interpretación, escojan español. Y por último, denle clic a la palabra listo, finalizado o done, D-O-N-E, en la parte superior de su pantalla. Y acá les estoy dejando las instrucciones en el chat también. Thank you so much, Brie.
Thank you, Leo. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the agenda. I know we have 90 minutes, but we have so much to get through today. So we are in the welcome right now. We're going to do a quick icebreaker so that we can hear who you all are, and then we'll share who we are and why we're the folks who are talking to you about this. We'll share some learning objectives for the day. And then it really breaks it down into 2 sections for the content. The background is what we've learned so far. So we have been engaged in this work in Illinois of bringing parent leaders into statewide early childhood decision-making for about a decade. And we've learned a lot along the way. And so we want to share with you how we've grown, how we've improved, and how all this has come to be, because we do think that that can be really instructive. And then we are going to kind of shift gears and look at the future. In our most recent statewide parent engagement work, we were actually able to develop recommendations around family engagement at the state level, really rooted in the Department of Early Childhood. So we're excited to share that. And then hopefully we'll have a bit of time at the end for reflection and questions. I will say, if questions come up throughout, feel free to drop them in the chat. I don't want you to have to hold them to the end. If we see them and we're able to respond either verbally or in the chat, we'll do that. Otherwise, we'll go through them at the end. And if there's anything we don't get to, we will send out any answers to questions we don't get to by email. All right, let's get into the icebreaker. We'd love to know who you all are. So if you could share your name, your role in this work, your organization, if that's applicable, and one thing that you hope to take away from today's session. And hopefully we can get to that stuff.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Tony Williams. I'm a family child care provider in Chicago, and my organization. Well, I guess I am my organization. And one thing I hope to take away is information on how to that I can take back to my parents to see who might be interested in getting more involved on a different level.
Awesome. Well, we will hopefully have something for you today. We've got some folks coming in from other states. That's very exciting. Welcome, everyone. Please keep those coming in the chat, and I will move us on into our introductions just so we can keep it moving. So my name is Bree Stormer. I'm with Illinois Action for Children. I'm the Senior Policy and Engagement Specialist. And the reason I'm here today, the reason that I'm talking to you all about this work is that Illinois Action for Children was lucky enough to be the backbone for the Family Advisory Committee of the Early Learning Council, as well as the Family Engagement Work Group. If you are not familiar with these terms, we will make you familiar with them before the end of today's session. But that's what I'm bringing today is my experience working with these two groups. And I will pass it off to Janet.
Hi, everyone. Happy Friday again. Janet Vargas. I currently am the CS3 Family Engagement Strategy Coach. I've also worked a part of my time supporting the last year of the Family Advisory Committee work. I will pass it on to Liliana.
Thank you, Janet. Hi, everyone. My name is Liliana Olayo, and I'm the co-chair emeritus with Power Pack Illinois. I live in Aurora, and I was one of the people that started from the beginning when we started the FAC. So I pass it to Samantha. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Samantha McDavid, and I am a former Family Advisory Committee and Family Engagement Work Group parent. When I first joined FAC, I believe my youngest daughter was in preschool, and she is now going to middle school. So it's been several years being in this work. I have 3 children. My oldest son is going into high school, and then I have 2 middle school girls, and I live in Northern Illinois. I work in the early childhood and systems development kind of sectors as well. And I'm going to pass it to Simone.
Good morning. My name is Simone Houston Moore, and I am on the Family Engagement Work Group. This is my first year. It's been a great year getting to know everyone and kind of diving into this work to kind of make all the processes involved a lot smoother. I'm also a parent like Samantha, and I have 3 boys, 9, 6, and 4. So I've been in the kind of age range that we all work with for a long time. And I also used to be in the early childhood workforce, so I have a lot of experience there as well. So glad to be here today. I'm going to pass it to Yolanda.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Yolanda Williams, and I am a parent. I'm a parent with a diverse learner, and I was previously on Power Pack. I was previously on the co-chair of early learning for Power Pack, and a parent on the Government Council. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. As you can see, we've got a lot of experience in this room, so we're very happy that all of these speakers were able to join us. We can get into our learning objectives. So first of all, we want by the end of this session, if you do not already, to understand the importance of parent leadership in early learning policymaking. Hopefully you're here because you already do, but if not, we hope to convince you. Secondly, we want you to learn about the role of parent leaders in creating and sustaining a statewide parent-led decision-making body for early childhood education and care in Illinois. That's a lot of words, but basically parents led this work and have been leading this work, and we want you to see how that came to be. Third, we want you to see the role of continuous quality improvement in creating and refining parent engagement practices. We are never done with this work. It is never perfect, but that doesn't mean we don't soldier forward. We continue to learn new things and get better all the time. And lastly, we want you to hear directly from parents about best practices in parent engagement that can be utilized at the programmatic community and state levels. It's good when it comes from us. It's better when it comes from them. So we want you to hear it from them as well as us. And really, hopefully, these recommendations, while they are definitely rooted in state systems and in the Illinois Department of Early Childhood as something that's sort of coming into vision right now, but the lessons can also be taken into other spaces. So if you're representing a program, an organization, there's a lot here that we hope you can take away. And so with that, I'm going to pass it off to Janet, Yolanda, and Liliana to tell you about how this all came to be.
Liliana, you can get us started on a little bit on the background on parent engagement and the Early Learning Council.
All right, thank you, Janet. Yes, well, we are with COFI, Community Organizing and Family Issues. And as you see, we are parents we are a group of parents COFI train the parents through Illinois, working on policy and systems change. We also have 4 issue campaigns that we focus, which is the elementary justice, mental health, justice, and equity campaign, stepping out of poverty, which is one of the co-chairs for that campaign also. And we have one of our richest one is the early learning campaign. You can learn more about our work, our parent leadership on those campaigns through our publication. It's called We're Glad You Asked. And I think it's gonna be dropped on the chat if you wanna learn more, because this is the power of parents, right? What we're gonna be talking about. So you can find more about the work of COFI, the work of Parent Power Pack in the chat. And I will hand it over to Yolanda, so she will talk a little bit more specifically about our early learning campaign.
Okay. Once again, as I previously said, I was the co-chair of Power Pack's Early Learning Committee and a parent on the governing council. A couple things that our committee had done. Next slide. A couple of different things that the committee has done was we launched in 2008. We surveyed over 5,000 families and found different barriers that they had having their children in preschool. And we made some recommendations from that. We launched the campaign in 2007, like I said before, with the 5,000 families. We created Chicago Early Learning Ambassador Program, a parent-to-parent, door-to-door outreach project in 2009 as well. And it taught the parents how to be able to share early learning resources with each other. Early intervention realigning pilot project was to address and raise awareness for special education services in 2017. And what came out of that now is the early intervention campaign. Successfully advocated with partners for Smart Start Illinois legislation that increased early childhood funding to $250 million for fiscal year 2024, but actually it was in 2020. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker and the Illinois General Assembly created a new Illinois Department of Early Childhood in 2024. Next slide.
Thank you, Liliana and Yolanda. As you can see, a little bit of a background on COFI and Power Pack. And so leading up to 2015, we had lots of parents who were eager to partner with system leaders to improve the early childhood system. And at the time, the place to participate in early childhood education and care systems change was the Early Learning Council, also known as the ELC. And for those of you who are outside of Illinois, the Early Learning Council is a body of government and private organizations appointed by the governor to advise their office on all things early childhood. And so I forgot to say during the introduction that, so although now I'm at Illinois Action for Children, back in 2015, I was an organizer with Kofi. And so I was also, so as part of this work. And so I was actually staffing the early childhood campaign, the early learning campaign. And at the time, so the parents eager to partner and to make improvements, right, to the early learning systems, started attending the ELC meetings with the help of Kofi organizers. And so they attended the broad, full early learning council meetings and their committee meetings and relevant work groups. But they were coming up against some obstacles that Yolanda will talk a little bit more about. Next slide, please.
Okay. We were really interested and excited about participating in the early learning council meetings and subcommittee meetings. Matter of fact, it was an honor for me to be on both of those committees. I had lots of fun. They were doing a lot, and we wanted to be able to sit at that table also. But we realized that there were some challenges to being able to fully participate. One, it was hard to follow along and very intimidating, especially those acronyms. And speaking in the early learning jargon, it went over my head. Far too many to attend all of the meetings as well. Not always covering the issues that were really important to us as parents. And the logistical obstacles, like no language translation. So that was something that needed to be addressed. And when we went to some of the meetings, we needed to have a photo ID to enter the building. And last but not least, it was downtown. It's kind of hard if you don't have a car or, the commute. And there was only one parent that was the official voting member on the Early Learning Council. And it was that woman right in the photo, Miss Gloria Harris. She was my mentor. Next slide. We let them know that we were really interested in being a part of the council, and we wanted to participate and share a proposal for how we might be able to incorporate parents' true voice into council decision-making and being able to bring our experience and expertise to the table. The state said yes. We need to change the way we were engaging parents, but they wanted to engage others in the process and the decision about what it could and should look like. Next slide. No, was that the one? Yeah, that's it.
Here, it's the Family Engagement Implementation Subcommittee. And the Family Engagement Implementation, this was created in charge with creating a proposal for how the Early Learning Council could be better involving families in their work. Didn't happen overnight. We started meeting in Aurora, And that's when I was just starting in getting into the early learning and getting more into deep waters with the campaigns that Coffee had working. So that's how I was caught about this. At that time, my kids were younger. Now I am a grandma, you can imagine. But that was the work that was very interested to me in close to me, because I didn't have the knowledge about something like that could be created. And we started to dream together how it will look like to have the something where the parents could be improving, because for our own experience, when we have our children, that wasn't working for many of us. So that was the idea. And we started to meet in Aurora, and we were like back and forth, and we were meeting at Chicago. And this group actually met for a couple years. So yes, didn't happen overnight. It was a long process. And it was taking different forms. We were adopting different models. Next slide, please. You know, we really wanted to have something that was representing all statewide. We really wanted to change that, you know, like some regions have better services, better access to services than other areas, other regions. So we start kind of like mapping and learning from different states actually about this work that they already have done implemented in their states. So what we did, we researched many different models of parent advisory councils across the country, like Michigan, Minneapolis, and the Head Start. So we could think about how we would like make it work and improve it for our families in Illinois. And at this part, we start kind of like, okay, we need a backbone, someone that will help us championing this and getting through through the whole state. So Action for Children was the backbone that everybody agreed that was the best resource that we could have, the best access, because it was a lot of criteria we're meeting, because we didn't have someone that was just like there for their name, but we wanted someone that was actually intentional and meaningful with the parent engagement piece. That was a very key component. And through the work, you know, we were meeting with parents, with early childhood agencies, with advocacy organizations, and community-based organizations also. So we come up with the proposal about the Family Advisory Committee, and it was different names that we were like, every time we went to a different phase, it was a new name. But it was, you know, you can see a smile on my face, because that brought me really good memories about when we are actually perseverant to keep pushing the work and to make it possible. It takes time. So all those years, it was really worth it. It was really worth it. The meetings, you know, we kind of like learn how to build relationship with others and meet new partners. So it was great. And it was a pleasure for me being part of this since the beginning. And, you know, now my kids are already grown up, and I even grab my grandkids. So if we got to do something even better, you know, this will be now the beginning for my grandkids. I have one is 5, one is just a few months, and good news. I expect to be a grandma for 3rd time now on November 2025. I just shared the news. I just find out. So very excited to share this with you. Okay. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Liliana, and congratulations. I feel you too. Like, I can't stop smiling. I'm like feeling like Rumi when Beyonce led her on the stage. I'm like so excited. and very cheesy. So a little bit more, as Yolanda and Liliana told us about the process, the Family Implementation Subcommittee went through super thoughtful and detailed process to put together a proposal that called for a group of diverse parents from throughout the state, who would add their parent perspective and experience to the early childhood system by advising and working with the Early Learning Committee, or Early Learning Council, all these alphabet soups, right? And the proposal called for 16 members, parents from across the state, to ensure geographic diversity and representation. They also talked about eligibility requirements, and we usually see that kind of in early childhood go up to age 8, but the conversation led the group to expand it up to age 12, from birth to 12, knowing that families age out of the early childhood system very quickly, and that sometimes those are the busiest years for families, and that a little the years 8 to 12, families still have that knowledge and experience that they can contribute, and also mentor families with younger ones. The terms were set to 3 years, with the idea that new members would come in on staggered terms to allow for onboarding and mentorship. The group would also get to elect 2 co-chairs from within its membership to then represent the group of parents both on the ELC and on its executive committee. And I did put a link to the proposal in the chat, and if you see, the original proposal was to get to a place where at least 20% of the Early Learning Council would be made up of parents, and that we didn't get to just yet, because there is some conflicts with the ELC statute, but we did end up with 2 parents on the ELC, which doubled it by 100%, baby steps. And then the supports and training were also included in the proposal, because that was an important part as identified by the subcommittee. Let me see. And I also want to note that when the implementation subcommittee was doing research, they put together the proposal, and then they went section by section, editing and making sure that everybody was in consensus with the proposal. There was they had hard conversations, they went in detail, and really were so very thoughtful, and always knew that there were some things that were going to pop up in implementation that could not be anticipated. And in the proposal also explicitly wrote, right, that this proposal would then need to be tweaked over time the more that we learned or implementation. So again, very thoughtful. And then ta-da, in 2019, the Family Advisory Committee proposal was presented and approved by the Early Learning Council. And you can see this is a picture from the day of, and we could see some heavy hitters supporting this effort. Rest in peace, Ms. Gloria Harris and Maria Whalen. You could see the happiness and pride in their face. And so this was just the beginning, right? The next slide. That puts us to February 19, and so from there on, the proposal is approved. Now we got to find money. There's a lot of people who are really invested in wanting to make this vision a reality. found funding, and the FAC is launched in November of 2020 because 2020 was the best year to launch new efforts. No, and so, but onward. And so it was launched, and there was quite a few, different obstacles along the way. And so the first term was choppy, but it happened, and it was a historic time for our state. And the FAC finished its first term in December of 2023. So as you can tell, this process was a long time coming through a collaborative, thoughtful, and a well-researched experience. And as a state, we need to keep building on the strengths and the work that we've already put forward, or else we're going to continue to go 3 steps forward, 1 step back, right? And so, and now Bree is going to go a little bit more into the details of what these strengths are and what the lessons are that we learned. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Janet, Liliana, and Yolanda. As you all can see, PowerPack and the Family Engagement Implementation Subcommittee did extraordinary work building out the FAC proposal. They, looked at the things that hadn't been working with parent engagement in the Early Learning Council. They were really thoughtful in their community engagement. And their work really did set IAFC as the backbone agency and the members of the FAC up for success in the first 3 years of this work in a number of different ways. So with that, I want to talk about some of the things that the FAC did really well. First off is staffing. The FAC had dedicated funding for staff support. The staff supported stipends, sending reminders, and between meeting communications, helped to create the agendas for and run the meetings, and recorded what happened at the meetings to support the FAC goals and work products, and all of that kind of between meeting work that has to happen. I'll say over that 3-year period that the FAC ran, staffing patterns changed. And what we saw consistently was that when we had consistent, strong staff support and people that were around, the more productive that group could be. The next one was regional representation. This was a huge strength. Illinois is regionally diverse, and families from different areas were able to highlight different issues and imagine different potential solutions. Families have been very clear, and you will see this throughout, that any statewide group really needs representation from all parts of the state. We also held all of our meetings virtually. Obviously, we started during COVID, and we had folks from all over the state, so folks were able to participate from anywhere. We did have one optional in-person gathering near the end, and for that, we offered transportation support, food, hotel stays for those who needed to overnight prior to the event, and childcare stipends. So really trying to be robust in our support for those in-person meetings. In terms of compensation, I know this is a question that comes up for everyone who's trying to do this work. We used the MIT Living Wage Calculator, and we landed on $50 per hour for participation, including some estimated time working outside of the meetings in that hourly calculation, especially near the end where we were kind of ramping up. And we did pay those stipends on a monthly basis. Commitment to continuous quality improvement. I've already talked about CQI a couple of different times, and this was really important to us. There were times in this work where families had some negative feedback about the way things were moving. We also have an evaluation there that has both positive and some things that we had areas to improve on. And we did our best to resolve the issues that were within our scope of control when we got that feedback, rather than kind of taking it personally. We really felt like, okay, what can we improve? Some of those improvements we were able to make within the FAC during our time together. Others we made in our transition to the Family Engagement Work Group. And there are more things that we could do, more suggestions for improvement in the recommendations that we'll share later. So with each bit of feedback, we just try to get a little bit better. Family co-chairs was another strength, and it meant that families drove the agenda and led much of the work. I will say when we talk about the Family Engagement Work Group a little bit later, This was the one thing of this whole list that we did not do with the few, because the time frame was so short and the schedule was so condensed. But families would really recommend it for longer term work in the future. And then this last thing, one thing we hear from parents often in this work is that they want the chance to build community with one another. So as facilitators, we have to keep that in mind and build in time and activities that allow for community building. I have to give Janet her flowers here because I can be very agenda focused, and she always did a great job reminding our team to make time for families to connect with one another. I said last thing, but I don't know why I said that. Training was another big one. The wonderful folks at Kofi conducted all 3 phases of their parent leadership training with families, which really set them up for success in this work. I'm not going to speak about these trainings nearly as well as Kofi, so I'm going to ask Kofi folks to please drop some info in the chat if you have not already. But what I'll say is that these trainings are really they're designed to help parents see the leadership and advocacy skills they already bring to their families, to their lives, and use those leadership skills in their communities and in the policy sphere. So just really helpful in this work. Here's the last thing. Every meeting we offered had bilingual interpretation in Spanish, even though we did not have any monolingual Spanish speakers. And the reason we did this was that these were open meetings and we wanted Spanish-speaking families to join and participate if they wanted to. And I'll say they did. We did have Spanish-speaking families come. The FAC was the first early childhood statewide meeting, to my knowledge, to offer interpretation. And it's become increasingly common. And I see the FAC as one of the primary groups to help drive that shift. And I think they deserve all the flowers for that. All right, going into their goals and accomplishments over their 3 years together. It's worth noting as we get into this, that one tension that surfaced as we were convening the FAC is that they served kind of 2 different roles. They were both a feedback mechanism for the Early Learning Council and a group with their own goals. And so when we were setting agendas and deciding how to move forward in meetings, it could be a little tricky to determine how to focus our time between those different charges. That said, the FAC managed to set 3 goals and get them done in our time together, which was amazing. The first was to better understand and provide solutions for pandemic-related enrollment barriers, and they did that via community outreach and engagement with decision makers. The second one really came out of that tension I mentioned. While the FAC was an advisory committee of the Early Learning Council, its charge and power within the larger Early Learning Council wasn't always clear. Janet talked about some of the statutory issues. It was, a learning process for everybody. So to improve how the ELC utilized family feedback, the FAC set a goal around creating specific guidance for the ELC to use, which we've linked to in the slide deck. And we can also link in the chat, Aman, if you're able to do that. In addition to those guidelines, we held a meeting at the end of the FAC's first term with statewide leaders where families could share additional feedback and personal stories about their participation. I regret that we don't have that meeting recorded. It was so beautiful. It was so powerful. But it was really a lovely way to culminate that time together. I think also it's worth saying, you'll see a lot of what's in the FAC recommendations in the few recommendations. And then if you kind of go through the Family Advisory Committee proposal into the FAC recommendations, into the few recommendations, I think what we see is that there is a lot of overlap, but we learn, we get more detail, we get more context, we get more specific. And so the 3 documents I think are cool to see together because you see how we're growing our knowledge as we do this work. This last goal of the FAC was rooted in the fact that families were noticing that they were often brought in for only the first phase of gathering feedback for any sort of project or report, but they weren't given opportunities to respond to findings as they coalesced or look at kind of draft reports or summaries. And other people in this space do get the opportunity to do that. So they wanted the chance to look at final recommendations that came from a project that some of them had been a part of in that initial feedback gathering phase and that meant something to them personally. they chose this preschool inclusion report from the Illinois State Board of Education. And while we're kind of focused on family engagement sort of in general today, if you're interested in that question, it's a really, really cool report and you should give it a read. But in addition to that, I think that there's something, there was a really cool lesson that came out of this, which was the more opportunities that we give families to offer feedback, the more we learn. And we utilize that lesson, I think, very quickly in this work. Lastly, I want to highlight just a couple of other accomplishments that were not rooted in FAC goals, but are still a big deal. First off, their advocacy got Early Learning Council meetings moved to the evening so that they could participate. And we, since then, have seen a huge movement across the state towards evening meetings, which has enabled both parent and provider participation in more statewide work. I mentioned interpretation on the previous slide, but it's been so exciting to see the field work to improve language access. We're getting better all the time. And last, but certainly not least, these family leaders are still out there doing the work, and we're going to continue to benefit from the investment in the FAC families for years to come. So that has been something that is always worth restating. So why, if we did all this good work, you may be wondering, did we not have a second cohort of the FAC? So the reason for that was really rooted in changes in governance. In October of 2023, Governor Pritzker announced plans to transition the state to a new unified agency for early childhood programs and services. In addition to thinking about improvements to programs and services, this also created an opportunity to think about the future of early childhood advisory tables and what might look different under a new agency. To help aid in that decision-making, NORC, the National Opinion Research Center at the University of Chicago, was asked to develop recommendations for equitable family engagement. Initially, the thought was the FAC members' terms would end while NORC developed recommendations, but we saw how powerful family feedback could be if families were given more opportunities to engage as recommendations were developing. And so folks at the state had the great idea to bring together a cohort of families to share feedback with NORC as they developed their recommendations. They suggested we use a combination of FAC families and newer parents in this work. And that is how the Family Engagement Work Group, or the FEW, was born in June 2024. So this all had to happen pretty quickly. We had the last FAC meeting in December. We had the first FEW meeting in June. And it's also worth noting that both our funding and NORC funding was based on a preschool development grant, birth through 5, no cost extension, which is a lot of words to say that we all had to be done by December 2024. And I mentioned this because we all know that sometimes funding and timing restrictions can prevent us from doing the work exactly how we'd want to do it. But we can and should still do everything that we can possibly do to make this work as strong as possible. So when we had just about a month to find families for this new group, we adapted the FAC application to address some of the things that we learned in that evaluation. We added points for diversity. We added points for use of different services that families might utilize across early childhood. We added points for involvement in other family leadership groups. And we added points for interest in early childhood systems because we wanted this group to be interested in the work that we were doing. And we captured that with just a qualitative question about why parents were interested in the Family Engagement Work Group. We did also make a slight reduction in points for those who worked in early childhood, so that there was a group that was more comprised of folks who primarily navigated the system as parents. We also wanted to do a better job reaching monolingual Spanish speakers, and we developed a Spanish application and Spanish communications about that application with intentional outreach to those communities. We ended up with a massive amount of applicants compared to our available slots, which was definitely told us that we have a ton of parents in the state who want to engage and share their voices in early childhood. It was very hard to select 10. We have some data on the side there about who applied, where they represent. And in the end, we ended up with 16 parents, same regional breakdown as the Family Advisory Committee, 6 former FAC members, 10 new families. And of those 16, we had 2 monolingual Spanish speakers and 1 dad. So in addition to trying to strengthen our application, we also worked to build on existing strengths and areas of improvement within the FAC. So we kept staffing support, regional representation, virtual meetings, compensation, and that commitment to CQI, while we worked to strengthen our communication. We sent lots and lots and lots of emails and text reminders and follow-ups. And when we asked if it was too much, we consistently heard a resounding no. Families were very clear that we could not over-communicate, and that multiple communication methods was appreciated. We also translated each and every one of those texts, emails, slides, and other communications into Spanish to ensure that our 2 monolingual speakers could participate as fully as our English-speaking parents. We did live interpretation on meetings, and we allowed our English and Spanish-speaking parents to communicate in real time. Actually, in fact, NORC did not have in their sort of predetermined scope funds available for translation. And so when they needed to give feedback on the reports as it developed, we funded the translation of those slides and reports because we wanted to make sure our monolingual Spanish speakers were able to participate. We also offered multiple meeting options. We did this work in a very, very short period of time, and we were not able to set a date or time that worked for all of our families, all of the partner orgs that were speaking. So we just ended up having 2 meetings covering the same content every month. Obviously, if you are a convening organization, a backbone, this is a big lift for staff. It's not without its cons around community building and kind of hearing the full feedback of the group, letting people be in discussion with one another. But as a result of this, we never had more than 1 parent miss a meeting each month. And parents said over and over again that this enabled their participation more than anything else. And that's why we have that asterisk there. I'll also note that our Spanish-speaking parents did coordinate their attendance. So we only had to pay for interpretation at one of those 2 meetings. So if you meet folks halfway, they'll meet you the other half, which is worth noting. We also work to keep that language family friendly. We use so many acronyms and terms in this work. I know this came up earlier, and we just want to make sure information is accessible to all. These last couple all go together, so they're all here together. First, to talk about training, this is worth noting because I think this comes up a lot for people. We had 6 members of the FAC who had done COFI's full parent leadership program. We had 10 parents who had been parts of other groups and had varied levels of training. And we had 6 months. So this made the question of what training to offer a pretty complicated one. Where we settled was that training would occur the month before conversations with NORC to scaffold those conversations. So prior to NORC sharing their initial summary of the findings from the focus groups that they had led, families did a leadership training to help them both see themselves as leaders in this work and also imagine their ideals for early childhood family engagement. And then prior to looking at NORC's equity recommendations, COFI offered an equity training to help parents really think about equity in early childhood, which you can see from this timeline that we shared with parents at that first few meeting. So that's that other piece. We really wanted to make sure that this group had a clear directive, that families knew what we were doing with their feedback. And this was the other thing that families really noted that they appreciated. They felt like they understood what we were doing with their feedback. They felt like we were being respectful of their time, and that mattered because people are busy. And so they want to know that what they're doing matters. I've been talking way too long. So I'm going to hand things over to Samantha McDavid, who you met earlier, participated in the FAC and the FEW, to share a bit about how this family engagement work changed over time from her perspective.
Thank you, Bree. Again, I'm Samantha McDavid. I participated in both the FAC and the FEW group. And I, as a parent, I was really, really excited to have the opportunity to do this work. At the time, I was working kind of in early childhood sector, but was pretty new to my career path. And so really was coming with the parent perspective of all of my children had just gone through publicly funded preschool and I had done some license exempt childcare out of my home when my children were infants and toddlers. And so I was really excited about it, and there were some differences and I think some lessons learned from FAC that were able to then be improved upon in the family engagement work group. One of those things, Bree mentioned earlier, that in the FAC, we had this kind of general goal of being an advisory committee to the Illinois Early Learning Council, but at the same time, we were developing our own goals, and there was, I think, some feelings. We weren't really sure where we were supposed to go. It would have been very helpful to have some parameters around what those goals should look like or what they should be, and what the Illinois Early Learning Council wanted to hear about from us. Just because by the end of the FAC, there were some feelings at times of like confusion or even being tokenized because some of the feedback we wanted to offer wasn't actually what they were looking for. And so having those clear directives that we did have during the family engagement work group were extremely helpful for parents, myself especially, to know what it is you want from me, and then be able to offer my best contributions because I have these parameters, I have this understanding of what's being looked for. I think the other piece that really worked well in the few that we worked through during the FAC was what that feedback mechanism looked like. During FAC, we were kind of building what that feedback mechanism looked like with the Illinois Early Learning Council. And there were several times where we kind of felt shut down as parents, like we weren't sure when we were supposed to give the feedback or how it was going to be used in decision making. And so during the family engagement work group, I feel like that was laid out much more clearly from the beginning. And I'm sure part of it is that we had such a short and tight timeline that we had to get this done. That helps make sure you have things more kind of shored up in the beginning. But it was such a big improvement for family participants to be able to say, like, we know where we're going, we know where this is going, and we know the end of it. And Bree mentioned some of the kind of the end of the FAC felt abrupt, I think, to families that were participating because we were not anticipating the legislative change and moving that work to the Department of Early Childhood. And so the mentoring piece was never fully realized. And I know a lot of us were really looking forward to that because we had spent 2 years building these skills and this leadership voice and this advocacy voice. And then we kind of didn't have as much of an opportunity then to support other parents that were up and coming in this work. Although that was wrapped a little bit into the family engagement work group by bringing in new perspectives. And so that was a good way to kind of make that work, even though it wasn't exactly what we had thought it would look like from the beginning. So just to kind of recap that, the clear goals, the defined timeline, and I think the greater back and forth communication, established feedback loop and mechanism for feedback really helped me as a parent to be able to engage in a more productive way that made me feel like my contributions were being heard and valued.
Thank you so much, Samantha. And I appreciate you especially bringing up the mentoring piece because I think that is one area where we still have some opportunity to learn. I don't think we've totally figured that out. And we're going to keep talking about continuous quality improvement, but there's just a lot. There's so much opportunity in this work. And with that, we have a lot to learn. So that is a place where we were able to do some, and we had hoped to do more, and the timeline was just so tight. And so hopefully in the next iteration of this work, we'll be able to really strengthen that piece. So let's get into the future of this work. So I'm really excited for this next piece. I know you all have been sitting with us for nearly an hour. I really hope you can stay because this is where we get to talk about the future and the recommendations that came from the family engagement work group. But before I share the recommendations, I do just want to share a bit of context about this report. And I know Aman dropped this report in the chat. I'll ask him just to drop it again for easy access. So we developed this report for a lot of reasons. First, we wanted to capture the incredible work that parents had done up until that point to improve early childhood family engagement at the state level in Illinois. There was a decade of work that happened that hadn't really been captured anywhere. And we think that all of this can be really instructive to other states thinking about bringing family voice to statewide early childhood decision-making. We also think there's a really interesting CQI story to tell here. With each iteration of this work, we've learned and grown and improved, and tracking those improvements helps to showcase what continuous quality improvement can look like in action and can help build a blueprint for continuous improvement in future parent engagement efforts. And so that first part of the report is really everything we've gone through thus far, all of that history and everything we learned along the way. Lastly, for the recommendations portion, we did know from the beginning that the FEW's primary charge was to support NORC in their equity recommendations. So there was an initial question about the utility of a second set of recommendations. We had some discussion and we decided to pursue them for two reasons. First, after talking with NORC a bit, we understood that their recommendations would focus on equitable parent engagement in general, with less of a focus on the structure within the Department of Early Childhood. And that's just because when they developed their scope and questions, the department hadn't been announced. So their results were just going to be a little more generalized because of that. Meanwhile, we had all of these parents who had been involved in parent engagement from the beginning. They had been at the local level, the regional level, the state level, and they could give us a lot of in-depth guidance around structure and supports. So we didn't want to lose that opportunity to get that feedback on how the department should structure their family engagement work. Secondly, and I got more flowers for Janet, she was really the person who said that this group deserved a product that was all their own. NORC's products were informed by a number of different groups, and while they certainly mentioned the family engagement work group throughout their report, we felt like it was important that they have something that really was their recommendations, the things that came from them. And they're in-depth and they're rooted in a ton of experience and in the stated goals of the department. Our hope is that for you, you can use these recommendations, whether you are from the state or whether you are in a program, an organization, or a community, because these best practices, I think, do really apply across the board. Last thing, I do just want to highlight this note at the bottom. Don't feel like you have to do each and every one of these things to do family engagement well, but understanding why families made these recommendations will help to ensure that you have a plan to meet their needs and effectively utilize their feedback, keeping in mind the challenges and barriers that you face in your specific context. So we're going to give these recommendations in buckets. And so the first bucket is really about structure of early childhood family engagement. And this is really rooted within the Illinois Department of Early Childhood. And this first one is a big one that came out, and that is tiered engagement with family-led tables working alongside decision-making tables. We had a lot of discussions about family-led tables compared to families sitting on tables alongside other early childhood decision makers. And what we heard over and over again is that separate family table matters. Families shared that the power dynamics in those shared spaces is one reason it matters, which you can see in this quote on the right. They also shared that they'd be willing to serve on other tables, but they don't want to just be one of a couple parent representatives unless they have the opportunity to convene with the family table and gut check recommendations or ideas. There has been concerns from decision makers voiced in the past about asking too much of families, and we asked about that. And families said if the commitment is clear and the supports are robust enough, many would be willing to do it. They also share that they just don't feel comfortable speaking on behalf of all parents, even if they feel comfortable speaking on that decision maker table, even if all of the work has been done to make sure that they've addressed some of those power dynamics. We also heard it can't just be this one family table at the top. We need to have tiered engagement. We need to have a combination of quick one-off opportunities and more extensive opportunities for feedback. One downfall we've heard about family tables is that they can become separated from where decisions are made, which is why families recommended giving families decision-making power and building it in from the beginning. If you know how you're going to use that family feedback and you communicate it early across all of the groups that you're working with, you reduce the likelihood that that family table is going to get siloed and get left out in the decision-making process, because you've articulated a structure in which that this will all, these recommendations will work together. Intentional follow-up is another piece here. If you know you have to report back on what you're doing with feedback with families, you're more inclined to have a plan for how to use it. And families want to see that follow-up at all levels, not just statewide table, not just that statewide table, but in those one-off opportunities as well. And that's why they recommend robust staffing with family engagement staff stationed locally. Those staff have the opportunity to build relationships with families, recruit them for opportunities where they think that they'd be a good fit, and then be that point person for follow-up, that contact that you know you can get in touch with. And then if you have those strong local relationships, we can also build in pathways to family leadership. We have so many amazing ways for families to engage in this state, but the leadership pathways are largely informal and just based on the different organizations knowing each other and trying to share out those opportunities. If we can create thoughtful tiers of engagement, we can build our family leaders from the grassroots up. Lastly, we heard that this only works if everyone is on the same page, and that means commitment to family engagement from agency leadership. When guidance for engaging families and how to use feedback comes from the top, families believe they will see that impact across the system. That commitment is something we've heard from the beginning about the transition to the Department of Early Childhood, and it's helped us develop these recommendations. So we're excited to see how this is built into the structure of the department. Before we move on, I'm going to pass the mic to Simone Houston Moore, who has served on a number of early childhood family engagement councils, to talk about her feelings about how to structure these family engagement spaces.
Thanks, Bree. I'm not really a good speaker, so just bear with me. But when we got to this point, this was something that immediately I was like, oh, I have to make sure I get my thoughts out, because this is something that I had kind of been internally struggling with on some of the other councils I'm a part of. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. So I'm on another council. I'm on thank you. I'm on another council here in Illinois, and I'm on Birth to 5 as well. And while I have a great council here in my region, I originally, for the 2 years, was on the family council. In this past year, I've been on the action council. And I remember sharing in our few meetings how all of the confidence that I had built being a family advocate on the family council was just, it didn't go away, but it had to immediately like change, like at the drop of a hat, because now I'm in this space where I'm with decision makers in my community, and it's just myself and another parent, and we're in there and we're looking at each other, and we're looking at each other and just kind of communicating like they don't get it. You know, it's been 2 years and they still don't get it. And so I think making sure that there's a way to mix the two when you're looking to do something like this is very important, because on that council you don't mix. The information is just given to the leadership, and then it's passed back and forth between the council, which creates a divide even though you're on the same team. And I think sometimes what would happen is the family council would share something, and by the time it got to the action council and was communicated, the action council felt like they already had a solution before the information was out there. And as a parent in that space, you're like, you're not listening. Like, you're listening, but you're not hearing what they're saying. You feel like, I can fix this. I know what to do. I can change this. But a lot of times the families are already giving you a solution, and you just have to listen to what they're saying instead of trying to, come up with what you may feel is better, or if maybe we can tweak it a little bit so like this. That devalues what they're saying. That kind of devalues the efforts they're putting in to be vulnerable and advocate for themselves. And so I think it's just very important to make sure that when you have different levels of a program, that those levels have an opportunity to mix and mingle and spend time together, other than maybe once a year at a celebration. Like, no, it should be actively while you're in the throes of making the changes. And I think that is something that has been very important during my time with the FU, and I appreciate that. And I just think it builds the confidence that families need to continue in this line of work, professionally or personally. So.
Thank you so much, Simone. I really appreciate you naming those challenges, because I think we saw those challenges too with the FAC, and it's really tricky. Like I don't want to gloss over like, oh, this is just an easy thing and we can figure it out. Like you really have to be intentional about the way you build this structure and about the way that you create communication across the tables and the way that you gather and utilize that feedback, because we know that families are taking time away. We know that they are coming into this space with hopes for change. And so we have to have our structures built in such a way that we know how we're going to utilize that feedback. We know we have the timeline set up in a way that we can do it. It's tricky stuff, but so worthwhile. This next section is about supports in family engagement spaces. And if you've ever been in a training about family engagement, you've seen many of these before. So I'm going to focus on sharing what was unique in the few recommendations, which I think was a lot, actually. So training, this has been in kind of a hot button issue just because we've seen different recommendations come out of different spaces about what kind of training to offer families. And so it hasn't always been super clear how to go forward with this. And we were lucky because we had these families who, some of them had been through many, many hours of training, and others had been through significantly less. So we asked, how should we manage that when we've got this group of people coming together with different levels of training? And I gotta say, if you build relationships with families and you ask a question directly, you get a really good direct answer. And so what we heard was that families agreed that all tables that engage families in early childhood decision-making spaces should have some baseline early childhood training. As we've said, lots of words, lots of acronyms. And just because folks are service users doesn't mean they have the same kind of knowledge of the program as we do. We're coming to it with different levels of expertise, so it's worth getting everyone on the same page. And if the parents do happen to know it, we heard that they appreciate that we're making sure that everyone is working off of the same baseline knowledge. For additional training, families said if they were going to be engaging on a specific topic or performing a task, let's say we're going to do advocacy, we should do an advocacy training. So just making sure that you have training to support the specific work that parents are going to be doing. Translation and interpretation, we've talked about this a billion times, but the main takeaway is that language justice means translating everything: reminder notes, slides, reports. We were translating text messages. And so just being sure that every time you're sending a communication, you're thinking about how your non-English speaking or bilingual folks are going to be able to access that information. Having folks on your staff who speak languages spoken by families is really important to facilitating this. And it's also important that translation is built into the budget and into someone's staff duties and responsibilities, whether it's coordinating that translation or doing it themselves. That's an area where honestly we had to improve. We weren't necessarily realizing just how much translation we were going to have to do. But if you want folks to speak other languages, you need to make it accessible to them. And I'll also say, if you want folks who speak other languages, you can't just translate the application. You also have to translate the communications about the application and do outreach to those groups. Multiple meeting options. We did talk about the pros and cons of this earlier, but it's worth noting again that the few shared that this was one of the things that most enabled their participation, and that we were still able to collect all this feedback and make these recommendations by having 2 meetings at a time. So we were able to facilitate discussions that way. Hybrid options. We heard that in general, families shared that they prefer virtual meetings for kind of our regular run of business meetings, and in person for kind of community building activities, things like that. These next 3 all kind of go together. And they're all related to in-person meetings, so they're all here together. On childcare, what we heard was if you want families with children with disabilities to participate in these spaces, childcare needs to meet the specific needs of those children. So you can't just use interns or older teens if you want those families to participate. On transportation, we heard more options is always better. So for example, when we had our in-person FAC meeting, we offered mileage reimbursements, we offered train tickets, and we offered carpools as options. People were coming from all over the state. They had different needs and preferences. So the more options you can offer, the more you're going to be able to facilitate people's attendance. On food, we heard that if it's dinner time and kids are invited, please have healthy food options. If you went to something that ran until 7:30 and there was nothing but cookies and you had a 10-year-old and a 4-year-old there, like imagine how you might feel. So just being thoughtful about how the food that you offer when you have these and the time of day. For stipends and non-monetary resources, we asked questions about how much to pay and how pay should work. And we got a lot of clarity there. We heard that the $50 an hour stipend felt appropriate for these longer term engagements, although we should be mindful of inflation. We also heard that monthly engagements should come with monthly pay. Checks were preferred among our families, but everyone agreed that there may be reasons that folks prefer gift cards. So if you are able to offer options, it may be able to enable participation. Not all funding allows it. If that's something you can do, it does help. We also heard that a quick one-off engagement, like a survey, you can do smaller resources, and it's helpful if those can be handed out right away. So if you've got physical $10 gift cards you can hand out, or if you've got a pack of diapers in exchange for filling out a survey, that can really help a lot. We mentioned this in the FAC section, but parents want to ensure that these spaces provide opportunities for families to connect with one another. Within the context of the Department of Early Childhood, we heard that it might be nice to have an annual conference for families that are doing this engagement work, so they can learn about engagement opportunities across the system and connect with one another. Within other structures, it could be as simple as building networking and social opportunities alongside all of those other opportunities. This last one is about making sure to recognize the families that are doing this work. Obviously, there are times where we need to protect confidentiality, but it's worth keeping in mind that families are using all of this knowledge that they're building and all of these skills that they're building to grow their own careers, to think about what's next for themselves. So if you can name them publicly, please do so. All right. I'm going to pass the mic back to Samantha to share a bit about how these supports have enabled her participation in engagement spaces.
Thank you again, Bree. Something when I was looking at my notes that I missed before, that really I think transitions though to enabling engagement in spaces is knowing about the work that came before you. So all of the work that Kofi and the Power Pack Illinois had done previously, I don't think in the FAC we spent enough time looking at how that had built into what the FAC was. But then I do think that on the family engagement work group, we did spend a little bit more time looking at that, and that helped me then with context of I can appreciate all of the work that's gone into setting this table where I'm at now and then looking to the future. But on some of these specific recommendations for supports, I think the training is so essential for level setting and for building those skills. It was something that even though I had done a lot, or I had done the Kofi training through the FAC, revisiting some of those topics with the new few members was really helpful for all of us, I think, to have then the same kind of pool of knowledge and shared knowledge so that we could really focus on the contributions we could make, and we could use the same language. And the community building, it's just so much easier to get right into the work and the discussions and sharing your vulnerable stories once you have kind of made some relationships with the people that you're sharing that space with. And so I really think it's so important to make sure that there's community building, especially at the beginning of a group coming together, but really built throughout, because it really maintains that that relationship that we can share, we can be brave in these spaces, and we will lift each other up. And I think that's important. Um, Understanding and flexibility of like the multiple meeting options for the FE or for the family engagement work group, that really was key for my participation because each month, as you can imagine, with 3 children, and some of our families have 5 children or 6 children, or we have children with very specific needs or disabilities that require, very specific care at different times. So having the flexibility to look at my month and say, I can make this meeting, that other one, there's no way it would ever work, was so helpful for my engagement and ability to be able to participate fully in the family engagement work group. And the understanding that we are parents first, and a lot of us are also working full-time jobs or multiple jobs on top of being, primary caregivers for our children. And so that is just having that understanding that we might be 5 minutes late, or we might have to join from the car because we're on the way to soccer practice or our child's therapy, whatever it is, that understanding goes a long way to making parents, it made me feel seen and valued and still encouraged to participate, even if it wasn't in maybe like an office setting or a traditional space. And really, just the stipends, it is so important to remember that families, again, a lot of times, whether they're working outside the home or not, while they're engaging in this work, they have so many other responsibilities, and the professionals that are at the table are getting paid to be there usually. And so families should be too. And the work that goes into that, the stipend is so helpful. And I think as a parent, it also helps me be accountable to the work that I've agreed to do. If I'm getting paid for something, I am expecting that I'm going to put my best effort forward then, because it is a job, it's a responsibility, and it's a formal obligation. And I think that's really important. And Bree mentioned the opportunities to build your leadership and advocacy skills. I think, especially during the family engagement work group, I was able to see where the work that I was doing at this table was impacting my professional trajectory as well, and building skills that I think are helpful for me today in the work that I do with other families and just in general. Knowing the systems that we're operating in and navigating in at our like local, regional, and state levels is so important then to being more prepared in the professional sense. And so I love that those skills are transferable then to the rest of my professional career and trajectory going forward. So thank you for the opportunity to share that, Bree.
Thank you so much, Samantha. And you did such a great job moving us into our next bucket because you covered a couple of the things that we found in our promoting equitable engagement bucket. So one of the first things that came up in this was if you want to reach certain groups, you have to do the work to reach those groups. That sounds kind of basic, but there has to be intentionality. So with a few, we wanted Spanish speakers. And we did that work. But in your work, it could be teen parents, it could be child welfare involved families, any other group. You need to think about how you'll go about reaching those groups and making yourself safe to those groups. And if you've got that robust staffing and that local footprint and those relationships that we mentioned earlier, that can really help with that outreach. We also heard that meeting norms should be developed and should be clear. One parent mentioned that she appreciated seeing her own identities reflected in a norm about refusing to tolerate judgment against specific groups. I think sometimes we try to be vague in these because we don't want to leave anyone out, but people want to see themselves in these norms. So maybe you develop that list together, thinking about how to do that. Others mentioned that they prefer to set up these spaces. And Samantha mentioned this as brave spaces, as courageous spaces, because we know that we can't always be safe, but we can create an environment that promotes courage. And that really gets into this next piece and how we can live out that idea of brave spaces. And that's with skilled meeting facilitation and facilitators who abide by the norms. And I have to draw your attention to this quote on the right because it is maybe my favorite quote from all of our time on the FEW. As facilitators in these spaces, we need to understand that parents are not getting on a Zoom while making dinner or running from soccer practice because they love everything that's going on and they have no complaints. Like, that's just true. They're showing up because they love their kids. They're passionate about change. And as facilitators, we have a responsibility to be brave enough to take that passion and channel it into action. We can't take it personally. They also want facilitators to be aware of any power dynamics in the room and enforce those norms so that everyone has an opportunity to share freely. Lastly, families shared that they sometimes feel misheard by facilitators, and they appreciate when they're active listeners and they repeat back what they've said just to ensure understanding. Next up was honoring different cultural norms, standards, and practices. So an example that came out of this was that some families live in multi-generational households. And so if you're having an in-person event, they may bring more than one adult to a function. So just plan accordingly with food and resources and things for that event, chairs, that people have different cultural norms, and some folks may bring different, more adults than you might think. We also heard that different cultures have different relationships to timeliness. And so organizers should think about that before dismissing the behavior as rude or the parent is not caring. Also, like, parents are busy. Being 10 minutes late, like, there may not have been a choice there. Lastly, parents shared that they wanted different ways to give feedback. We know different people have different learning styles. Some are good speaking up. Some like to put their thoughts in writing. Some need more time to organize their thoughts. So the more options you offer, the stronger the feedback will be. So I'm going to pass it back to Simone to share about how some of these have enabled her participation in this work.
Thanks, Bree. The two main that I don't really have any cultural things that needed to be honored, but I think for me personally, one thing that was very important was having skilled meeting facilitation, because you can put anybody in a space, but that does not mean that they have the skills to get things going how they need to go in the right direction. But those are the same people asking that of the family. And so I always pay heavy attention to that when I'm in councils and things like that. And it's never personal to that person or anything, but I do think that it should always be considered when you are looking at who's going to facilitate your meetings. And also, if it's the same person who facilitates like your family and your professional, making sure that they're able to bend and flex and meet both of those populations where they're at. If they enter into the parent space with that power dynamic, even if it's subconscious, they don't know, it can really alter how your program goes. And then if they go back to the place with the power players and they're not able to speak that language, I think that can also really affect how your program flows. So I think just making sure that when you choose a facilitator for your meetings, making sure that they have the skills or that you're willing to provide them with those skills, because they may need training just like the family participants do, and choosing someone that's willing to go the extra mile to get that training. And then I also really, the clarity in meeting norms. Bree, I think, knows this now about me. I need everything I need it out. I need it all out there step by step. And that's just the way that I process things. And it allows me to show up better and meet the needs of what is being asked of me, as we talked about throughout this. But I think that was a very big piece of why the FEW group that I showed up intentional every time. Not that I don't in other spaces, but I think this was different for me because I knew exactly what was needed from me, and it wasn't left up to interpretation. I wasn't there just maybe saying, is this what you're looking for? Or maybe you're wanting this. They communicated very well what they were needing. Of course, it could have been the time frame, but if it takes a time frame, then that's what it takes. But I think those are the two things that really created a program in an agency council space, whatever you're creating, where I felt welcome to come back every time. And wanting to share with other people and tell other people and tell people what I was doing. And I think those are important, because that's how you build that community, and that's how you potentially have more applicants come and things like that, is when you have the people that are there willing to tell about your mission. So I think those would probably be the two things that really were important to me.
Thank you so much, Simone. I am very aware of the time, and we have one more bucket to get to. So I'm going to breeze through so I can hand it off to Samantha. Communication. First off, do all the things. Everybody says just do all the things. You can, so we should. Parents are going to access information in different ways. Be transparent. Sometimes we run out of money to run a group. We can say that. Sometimes we don't have the funds to implement a recommendation fully. We can say that. They're being brave. We can be brave too. Clarity in how feedback will be used and clear benefits to families. This one was really about at the outset. So if you're trying to recruit families for this work, and you can say, this is what we're doing with your feedback, and they can see that benefit to their family, you're going to have a lot easier time getting participation. Lastly, feedback loops and ongoing contact. If you're doing stuff with these recommendations, let people know. They deserve to know what's going on. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Samantha.
Thank you. I'm going to try to be very quick because I also see the time. And really, this hits it. I think any work you're doing with parents, the more transparent and clear you can be from the beginning about what you want them to do and how they'll be engaged and how their words and their contributions are going to be used in the future is so important. And Bree talked about this a little bit earlier, but when you can acknowledge that work publicly, when it's safe to do so and when it's appropriate to do so, I also think that is huge, because it again feeds into this idea that I'm developing as not just a person but as a professional, and it's good to be recognized for your work. And then the multiple modalities of communication is so important, because we all take information in differently, and a text message is going to be a lot more impactful for me if I can get it right away than 10 emails, honestly. So things like that are so important and can be carried into any work you're doing and engaging families. So thank you again for letting me share.
Thank you so much, Samantha. I had some reflection questions here. I'll ask for you to please reflect on them. And if you have any thoughts that you'd like to share with us, please feel free to email them. I dropped an email in the chat. But specifically, we're curious about, do you feel like you have what you need to utilize these recommendations in your work, or do you need something else? Because if you need something else, we'd like to give you that. And so if there are resources or supports we could provide, please do let us know. And then I have to get to this because this is the meat and potatoes, the bread and butter. Yeah, I can stay on as well, but just being thoughtful about the folks who do have to hop off. These are the members of the Power Pack Illinois, of the Family Advisory Committee and the Family Engagement Work Group. We will send these slides out after, of course, we sent them before, but they deserve all of the acknowledgement, all of the flowers, all of the rounds of applause, because all of this work really happened because of them. So thank you to all of these parents. And lastly, please do stay in touch. We are around. We would love to hear from you. These are our contacts, and you can learn more about Ko-fi at the top QR code, and you can sign up for IAFC's advocacy and policy newsletter at the second. That's where we are advertising our other family engagement webinars. And so if you enjoyed this and you'd like to see what else is going on, please consider signing up and getting that info. And we'll send these if you don't have the chance to capture that QR code right now. Thank you all for being with us. We can stay on if folks have questions, but we really appreciate your time today.